Hey everyone, these are the Boy in the Striped Pajamas questions for Chapter 9. Before I start with these, I just wanted to clear up a couple things from the previous questions that I'd thought of. The first is about Pavel. This was in the questions from last chapter. It's important to understand that Pavel is a doctor. He says that he practiced as a doctor. Um, that that means that he actually is a doctor. The humor there is that Bruno doesn't understand that. Bruno thinks that to practice as a doctor is to sort of pretend or learn to be one. But it's important for us to understand that Pavel is a doctor. This is important because it points something out to us about the Holocaust, and that's sort of the bigger issue of the novel. Um, it didn't matter who you were, right? Presumably, Pavel was a very successful man. He says that he was a very good doctor. Um, and now, as he's being taken to this concentration camp, he's treated like a slave, like a servant, just like anybody else, right? So even his we assume is like kind of a high social standing before the Holocaust, he's now reduced to be nothing more than a slave. The second thing has to do with the pajamas. And I think that most of you probably understand this, but I just want to be very clear about this. The people in the camp are not actually wearing pajamas. Um, this is one of those things that we're seeing from Bruno's perspective. So, in his eyes, they look like striped pajamas. Actually, they're prison uniforms. That's what the people in the camps would wear. Bruno doesn't understand what a prison outfit or uniform looks like. So to him, they're pajamas. Chapter 9, question number 1. What change happens at Outwith? On page 96, Boyne, the author, writes, Father decided it was time for the children to return to their studies. They need to be back in school, so he hires a tutor for them to come and teach them named Herr List. So question 2, what is Herr List like? Most of you picked up on this idea that he's very stern, right? He's very intense. Bruno says that it seems like he's angry in some way on the inside. But we can actually figure out a little bit more about him too. He's interested in geography and history. And this isn't a coincidence. Okay, Boyne chooses those subjects because he wants to make a point. List says he wants to teach Bruno about not about his personal history, where his own life, but the history of who you are. This is over on page 98. Where you come from, your family's heritage, the fatherland. And then further on down, he wants to get your head out of your storybooks and teach you more about where you come from, about the great wrongs that have been done to you. So what he's getting at here is this kind of fixation on Germanness, on German identity, German pride, that sense of Germans as superior than other kinds of people. Herr List is a Nazi, or at least he's a Nazi supporter. And that's kind of what we can get from this description of him. Question 3, what makes Bruno decide to go exploring? Essentially boredom. He's sitting around and he kind of thinks to himself, hey, I used to go exploring all the time when I was in Berlin, and there was so much to explore there. Why don't I try exploring around here as well? Number 4, what does Bruno see happening at the camp? A lot of really the same kinds of stuff, but there's some details here that we want to pay attention to. So on the bottom of page 100, the pajama people all jumped to attention whenever the soldiers approached, and sometimes they fell to the ground. And sometimes they didn't even get up and had to be carried away instead. The important thing here is that we're getting an image of what the Holocaust was like, but we're getting it from Bruno's perspective. So these are just these little things that he happens to notice. But what is really going on here? I mean, imagine it in your mind. It's unclear why these people are falling onto the ground, but presumably from exhaustion. They could be being beaten. They could just be really in despair, right? Really, really sad. And they can't even get up off the ground. They're just sort of lying there and then being carried away. These are really powerful images of the Holocaust. So we want to make sure and notice those little details, even though Bruno just kind of skips over them. What does Bruno try to not think about as he goes exploring? This is on page 103, that he was not allowed to walk in this direction. that he was not allowed anywhere near the fence or the camp, and most particularly that exploration was banned at Outwith with no exceptions.